Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our top stories. Pakistan's ambassador to Russia has said his country will use its full spectrum of power if it is attacked by India. Meanwhile, the Indian Air Chief Marshal has met with Prime Minister Narendra Modi as tensions increase following the devastating Pahalgam terror attack. Russian President Vladimir Putin says he hopes there is no need to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine as drone strikes are reported by both Russia and Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he will not play Putin's games with a short ceasefire. Meanwhile, Chinese President Xi Jinping will make an official visit to Russia from the 7th to the 10th of May, according to the Kremlin. Xi will take part in the 80th anniversary of World War II celebrations, which is when Putin has proposed the ceasefire with Ukraine for. Israel's military has issued tens of thousands of call-up notices to reservists to support a potential expanded offensive in Gaza. It comes as a dispute between Qatar and Israel continues over Gaza ceasefire negotiations. A missile launched from Yemen has hit near Israel's Ben Gurion airport in Tel Aviv. The attack wasn't stopped by Israel's air defense system and temporarily halted air traffic at the country's busiest airports. Taiwan's Ministry of Defense has detected 8 sorties of Chinese aircraft and 7 naval vessels near its territory. 6 aircraft crossed the median line of the Taiwan Strait as tensions between the self-governed island and mainland China continue. Following a landslide federal election victory in Australia, Anthony Albanese's Labour Party say they will prioritise dealing with the US-China trade war. Albanese says he will run a disciplined and orderly government. The United Nations Special Envoy Geir Pedersen has urged Israel to halt attacks on Syria at once. Strikes on the Islamist-led authorities have followed sectarian violence, with Israel saying its forces are ready to protect the Druze community. We start this hour as Pakistan's ambassador to Russia, Mohammad Khalid Jamali, has warned of a nuclear response if India initiates military action. He claimed leaked documents show India plans to target specific Pakistani sites. The ambassador stressed that a conflict between the two nations could be imminent. India has stopped the flow of water through the Balaghat Dam on the Chenab River and is planning similar actions at the Kishanganga Dam on the Jhelum River, according to media reports. Air Chief Marshal AP Singh met with Prime Minister Narendra Modi amid rising tensions with Pakistan following the Pahalgam terror attack. Navy Chief Admiral Dinesh K. Tripathi met with Prime Minister yesterday to brief him on the situation in the Arabian Sea, where India's maritime authorities have issued a navigation warning for commercial ships due to ongoing Indian Navy drills. In a major counter-espionage operation, Amritsar Rural Police have arrested 2 individuals accused of leaking sensitive information and photographs of military camps and air bases in Amritsar. The arrested men have been identified as Palak Shah Masir and Suraj Masir. The Indian Army has received new supplies of Russian origin IGLAS missiles under a contract signed using emergency procurement powers granted by the centre. The Indian Army has issued a tender to produce shoulder-fired very short-range air defence systems to target enemy aircraft, helicopters and drones. The Army has requested 48 launchers, 85 missiles and other equipment under the Make in India initiative. Moving now to the Middle East, and Gaza's government media office reports that over 3,500 children under 5 face imminent death by starvation. while around 290,000 others are on the brink of death as Israel continues to block the entry of baby formula, nutritional supplements and all forms of humanitarian aid. Qatar is hitting back at Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, rejecting his criticism of its role in the Gaza truce negotiations. Acting as a key mediator between Israel and Hamas, Qatar says Netanyahu's remarks lack both political judgment and moral responsibility. Foreign Ministry spokesman Majid al-Ansari slammed the comments online, calling them inflammatory. This comes after Netanyahu's office issued a strongly worded statement urging Qatar to choose between civilization and Hamas. Netanyahu claimed Doha cannot serve as a neutral broker while maintaining ties with both. Meanwhile, Israel is mobilizing tens of thousands of reservists ahead of a widening offensive in Gaza. Israeli media reported that the military is issuing call-up orders to replace active troops in Israel and the occupied West Bank. The military has neither confirmed nor denied these reports. In Tel Aviv, demonstrators gathered outside the Defense Ministry demanding action to secure the release of hostages held in Gaza and an end to the war. Protesters waved Israeli flags and held portraits of captives taken during the October 7th attacks. Let's listen in to what some of them had to say.
I'm afraid of where this country is going towards with this very interest-oriented, politically oriented government, where nothing is really for the benefit of the citizens and more for their own benefit. So yes, I want to change this government. I want to be part of this force here that will maybe bring about the change, because we need that change.
Came to support Israeli democracy and the return of the hostages. And there's a sense of, we're drowning in the mud. There's no strategic decision made. It should be some thought of the day after, maybe some kind of, constructive work with other countries in the region that are more on the stable side, like Saudi Arabia. Something that would change the policy and most importantly bring back the hostages to us.
Moving now to Europe, and Russian President Vladimir Putin has said that the need to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine has not arisen and that he hoped they will not be required. In an interview, Putin said that Russia has the strength and the means to bring the conflict in Ukraine to a logical conclusion. Meanwhile, Russia's overnight drone attack on Kyiv has injured at least 11 people, including 2 children, and set several residential buildings throughout the city on fire, according to the military and officials of the Ukrainian capital. Timur Tkaichenko, head of Kyiv's military administration, said on social media that falling debris from destroyed drones had sparked fires at residential buildings in Kyiv. This comes after Ukraine struck several Russian cities on Saturday in what Russia called a mass drone attack. According to local Russian officials, apartment blocks in the Black Sea town of Novorossiysk were damaged by the drone strikes. The mayor of the Russian port city said that the drone attack injured 5 people, including 2 children. Meanwhile, tensions are rising over the 3-day ceasefire proposed by Russian President Vladimir Putin. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has accused Putin of playing games after the Russian leader proposed the 72-hour unilateral ceasefire to coincide with Moscow's Victory Day commemorations. Zelensky has also called the truce a theatrical performance on Putin's part and said that Ukraine could not guarantee the safety of any foreign dignitaries who come to Moscow for the Victory Day. Meanwhile, Russia reportedly continues to reject an unconditional 30-day ceasefire pushed by Ukraine and the United States, which is trying to broker an end to the more than 3-year war. Well, joining us to discuss all of these latest developments is Professor Alexei Haran, a professor of comparative politics at the University of Kyiv-Mohyla, who's joining us from Kyiv in Ukraine. Professor Haran, thank you ever so much for being here. I want to first pick up on these comments that have been made by Vladimir Putin, saying that there's been no need for nuclear weapons in Ukraine. Is this a warning that Russia has them and can use them if they want to, or is this a sign of de-escalating tensions and a chance towards a more permanent ceasefire?
No, it's a very cynical statement, because actually since the start of Russian full-scale invasion, Russia continuously intimidated Ukraine and other countries with nuclear weapons. So actually Russia is doing it all the time since the full-scale invasion. That's why what Putin is saying right now, it's a bit, very cynical. The very question about using nuclear weapons against the country which gave up the third nuclear arsenal in the world. And Russia guaranteed our territorial security. So we disarmed and Russia attacked. And Russia is killing Ukrainians, civilian Ukrainians. And yes, this night, actually, the explosions were nearby my vicinity. I know actually the buildings which were hit. Several days ago, a building which is 300 meters from my daughter's house was totally destroyed. So that's what Russia is doing. It's intimidating, civilians in Ukraine. That's why we shouldn't equate it with what Ukraine is doing, okay? Because in your presentation, it sounded that Russian attack was kind of response to Ukrainian attack. Not at all. Come on, Russia is aggressor. We shouldn't equate the rapist and its victim. Yes, we are defending our freedom, so we are striking military objects and the Navy, Russian Navy, but we are not striking civilians objects. This is a total different with what Russia is doing in Ukraine. I am providing you with hard facts. It's not about interpretations. That's hard facts. Russia is continuously destroying Ukrainian cities and killing Ukrainian civilians. We know about that. There is a lot of footages, a lot of episodes on YouTube, on internet. So everybody who wants to know knows it.
Professor Haran, I want to talk about this proposed 3-day ceasefire. Volodymyr Zelensky, of course, the president of Ukraine, saying that foreign dignitaries won't have guaranteed safety if they attend this end of the Second World War 80th anniversary celebration. Do you think it's in Zelensky's interest to agree to this 3-day ceasefire, to potentially work towards a longer 30-day ceasefire as he's proposed?
No, there are two different questions here. First, yes, we cannot guarantee what's happened with foreign visitors in Russia, because Russia is always organizing provocations. So yes, they may, explode some of the objects in Russia and then saying, okay, these are Ukrainians who are trying, to kill foreign visitors, so they can do that. They're doing it actually many times in their own history. So that's why, yes, we cannot guarantee. That's right. Now, the question about ceasefire is different. So what Russia is saying, Russia wants to have 3 days ceasefire to celebrate May 9th, their victory day. By the way, the whole world celebrated on May 8th. So Russia would like to celebrate and to have military parade in Moscow, but they refuse to continue this ceasefire. They continue to strike Ukrainian civilians and Ukrainian citizens. What President Zelensky is saying, he is saying, okay, you propose 3 days ceasefire, let's have 30 days ceasefire. We can start it with every day in May. We can start it on May 7th, we can start it on May 5th, but let's do it 30-day ceasefire, and we'll see what Russia will say. Previously, they were saying no. Again, Ukraine agreed to full-scale, continuous ceasefire. Russians said no. So they're trying, to speak from the language of force by continuing to strike Ukraine and Ukrainian cities. So that's why they do not want real ceasefire.
Professor Alexei Haran, thank you ever so much for joining us and providing more of an insight there as these negotiations continue between Russia and Ukraine over a potential ceasefire. Make sure you're tuning in to NewsX World for all of the updates. We move on now to the Middle East, and Israel's Defence Minister Israel Katz has threatened a forceful response to a missile fired from Yemen that the army said impacted near the country's main international airport. He added, "Anyone who hits us, we will hit them 7 times stronger." This came after Israel's military reported a missile launch from Yemen, prompting air raid sirens across parts of the country. Explosions were heard near Jerusalem and Ben Gurion International Airport in Tel Aviv. The Israeli military said multiple attempts were made to intercept the missile, and police confirmed that bomb disposal teams were investigating fragments of a fallen munition in central Israel. Yemen's Houthi rebels have claimed full responsibility for the strike. The Iran-backed group, which controls large areas of Yemen, has previously launched missiles and drones targeting Israel and Red Sea shipping in solidarity with Palestinians during the Gaza conflict. Just a day earlier, the Houthis claimed responsibility for their 3rd missile strike on Israel in 48 hours, though they had paused attacks during a recent Gaza ceasefire. The rebels warned in March that they would resume operations, citing Israel's aid blockade on the Gaza Strip. Tensions remain high as both Israel and regional actors brace for further escalation. Moving on now, Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is celebrating a resounding re-election victory, becoming the first man in 2 decades to win back-to-back terms. The centre-left Labour Party is projected to expand its majority, defying months of trailing polls and growing voter frustration over inflation and cost of living pressures. But the tide turned when the opposition Conservatives, led by Peter Dutton, proposed slashing the federal workforce and forcing public servants back into offices 5 days a week. That move, likened to Trump-era policies, sparked backlash and was seen as unfair to working women. Now, Treasurer Jim Chalmers says the government's top priority is managing the global uncertainty from the ongoing US-China trade war. He called it the dark shadow over Australia's economic outlook. Let's hear what he had to say.
Obviously, the immediate focus is on this global economic uncertainty, particularly the US and China part of that and what it means for us. And so I was able to be briefed on that, what's happening in markets and what it means for the Australian economy. So clearly that's the immediate focus. And again, I think one of the reasons why we got this big majority last night is because people recognised that if you wanted stability while the global economy was going crazy, then a majority Labor government was the best way to deliver that.
Meanwhile, Albanese, speaking to reporters after the win, said Australians voted for unity rather than division. He promised a disciplined and orderly government that would work every day to ease cost of living pain and navigate global challenges. Let's hear what the Australian Prime Minister had to say.
The Australian people voted for unity rather than division. We will be a disciplined, orderly government in our second term, just like we have been in our first. We've been given the great honour of serving the Australian people, and we don't take it for granted, and we'll work hard each and every day. Thank you.
Well, partial results show Labour on track to win at least 83 seats, with the opposition securing just 38. More than 2/3 of votes have been counted. Dutton, who campaigned on hardline Conservative policies, suffered a major blow, losing his own seat in a rare political upset. For now, it's celebration time for Albanese, who made a quick stop at his local cafe and even scooped ice cream for the press before heading to a Sydney brewery serving Albo Pale Ale. Moving on now, Chinese President Xi Jinping will visit Russia from May the 7th to May the 10th to attend the 80th anniversary of the Allied victory over Nazi Germany. According to the Kremlin, he will join Russian President Vladimir Putin at the May 9th Victory Day celebrations in Moscow, one of Russia's most symbolic holidays, and hold bilateral talks focusing on deepening strategic and regional partnerships. During the visit, both countries are expected to sign several key bilateral agreements. Putin has announced a 3-day ceasefire in Ukraine to coincide with the celebrations. However, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has rejected the move as mere theatrics, demanding instead, as we mentioned earlier, a 30-day ceasefire, something Moscow has ruled out. China, officially neutral in the war, is under increasing Western scrutiny for its close economic and diplomatic alignment with Russia. The visit underscores Beijing and Moscow's growing bond, even as the war in Ukraine continues with no clear resolution in sight. Well, joining us to discuss this announcement from the Kremlin of President Xi's visit to Russia is Srikant Kondapalli, a professor of China Studies at JNU. Thank you very much for joining us, Srikant. I want to look first at the meaning of this meeting, besides, of course, the celebrations on May the 9th for the end of the Second World War and Victory Day for Russia. We mentioned that there will be some agreements signed. What do you think these will focus on?
Well, the visit is not new. President Xi visited Moscow 3 years ago, 2022 February and 2023 February. And before that, President Putin visited China and they signed a limitless partnership, as it was called at the time. So the current visit will have taken into consideration the tariff wars, the Trump administration's policies regarding the recent restrictions on trade and other technology and so on. But previously, President Biden has suggested to President Xi Jinping that there should be no material support to the Ukraine conflict from the Chinese side. And information is that China does supply electronic warfare equipment, semiconductors, drones, some satellite imageries, and so on, in addition to some ordnance-related logistics. But the current visit would have possibly what they call strategic partnership that was signed in June 2001. And that includes a number of issues. Trade has increased substantially with Russia. The Chinese trade, over $220 billion last year. And energy also has been exported substantially to China, some $62 billion worth of energy that has been supplied to China at discount prices in the light of the sanctions from the Western European countries and so on. But there is also the concern that Russia has in terms of the flooding of the Russian market, specifically in terms of the cheaper goods as well as automobiles, especially electric vehicles. So this is a concern for Russia. There is also the Chinese, overcoming the SWIFT system where there are sanctions imposed on Russia. So China has been helping out Russia in this regard in the financial matters. And there is also, of course, the Far Eastern region, which has complained about the restrictions imposed on the fishery exports to China. Then there is the concern on espionage cases in Russia involving some Chinese nationals. So these are some issues, even though at a leadership level, they are very cordial and they are coordinating in the United Nations Security Council, G20, BRICS, SEO, and other multilateral institutions.
Yes, absolutely. I want to look at the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict. We spoke earlier in this programme about President Zelensky warning that foreign dignitaries won't be guaranteed safety. Is this something that you think Xi will be keeping in mind? And also, what's China's role in the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war?
Well, the Chinese have released a 12-point proposal for the resolution of the Ukrainian conflict. Many of these are, of course, well known in terms of the so-called neutrality, but there is the concern expressed in terms of North Koreans joining the war, as well as also some Chinese. So this is a major concern for the other countries. In terms of the threat that President Zelensky has mentioned, of course, Russia is well prepared in terms of the ballistic missile defense and any entry-exit of these airborne weapon systems. So it is possibly more a threat rather than a realistic kind of assessment on the situation in the 80th anniversary.
Yes, absolutely. We have time for one quick question, and obviously you've mentioned there some trade relations. Given the ongoing trade war between the US and China, is there a chance here that there could be a new economic alliance formed as well that could see China and Russia build on the trade negotiations and relationships that they already have?
Yes, but there is a limitation in terms of trade because initially the trade was just about less than $100 billion. Now it has gone up to $220 billion. There is a limit for this trade because of the sparse population of Russia consumers and also because of the concern on the Chinese role in terms of trade and so on and so forth. The Eurasian Economic Council has a arrangement with the Belt and Road Initiative projects. They also have free trade negotiations in this regard. Yet Russia is still not prepared for the full-blown economic contacts with China because of the concerns on the Chinese gobbling up the Russian market, as well as the Russian market itself is very small in terms of the consumer markets and so on.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you ever so much, Shrikant Kondapalli, for joining us. As that meeting takes place over 3 days, we will of course bring you all of the updates, but we stay in the Indo-Pacific region, and Taiwan's Ministry of National Defence has detected 8 Chinese PLA aircraft, 7 PLA Navy vessels and 1 official Chinese ship near its territory. 6 aircraft crossed the median line into Taiwan's air defence identification zone. Taiwan tracked their movements across the northern, southwestern and eastern zones and responded promptly. This marks the 2nd consecutive day of Chinese military activity near Taiwan. On Saturday, 7 PLA aircraft and 7 naval vessels entered Taiwan's air defence identification zone. These repeated manoeuvres have raised fresh concerns over regional security. Heading now to Africa, the civil war in Sudan has taken a dangerous turn. The Rapid Support Forces, or known as the RSF, Sudan's paramilitary group, has launched its first drone attack on Port Sudan, targeting a military airbase and nearby facilities. The Sudanese army confirmed that no casualties were reported. Port Sudan, home to the country's primary airport, army headquarters and a seaport, has been perceived as the safest place in the war-ravaged nation. In a separate attack, the RSF struck Kassala airport near the Eritrean border, hitting the fuel storage area. A pro-army source confirmed that there were no casualties or damage. The RSF has recently intensified its aerial attacks on army-controlled regions following territorial losses in the country's capital of Khartoum. This escalation marks a significant shift in the war, which has divided the country and caused widespread displacement. The war in Sudan erupted in April 2023 amid a power struggle between the army and RSF head of a planned transition to civilian rule. The situation remains tense as both sides continue to target strategic infrastructure. Staying in the region, Doctors Without Borders has said that its hospital in Old Fangak, South Sudan, was bombed, destroying the pharmacy and all medical supplies. The group reported that people were killed and injured in the attack. The bombing comes amid renewed conflict in the country following the breakdown of a power-sharing deal between President Salva Kiir and Vice President Riek Machar. MSF says the hospital was the only one serving the area and has called for an immediate end to the bombing of medical facilities. Heading back now to the Middle East, and United Nations Special Envoy Geir Pedersen has called on Israel to immediately halt its airstrikes on Syria following multiple attacks targeting the Islamist-led authorities in response to sectarian violence this week. Further Israeli raids were reported overnight, with Israel stating that its forces were prepared to protect the Druze minority after clashes killed 119 people, mostly Druze fighters, according to a UK-based war monitor. Meanwhile, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights reported that more than 20 strikes targeted military sites across Syria on Friday, describing it as the heaviest Israeli assault on Syria this year. Since the ousting of long-term ruler Bashar al-Assad in December, Syria's new authorities have promised inclusive governance, though they reportedly face pressure from radical Islamists within their own ranks. Moving on now, a tragic incident at Manila's Ninoy Aquino International Airport has left 2 people dead, including a 5-year-old girl, and several others have been injured after an SUV crashed into the terminal entrance. The crash occurred near Terminal 1 after the vehicle went through an outer railing and onto the walkway. The victims were a 29-year-old man and a girl, while reports on the number of injured vary, with some sources saying 3 and others 4 who were hurt. Authorities reviewed CCTV footage showing the driver assisting a passenger with luggage before the SUV unexpectedly accelerated. Transportation Secretary Vince Dizon said the crash may not have been intentional and the driver, who is in police custody, will undergo drug testing. Dizon urged the public to avoid speculation as the investigation continues. Let's listen in to what the Philippines Transport Secretary has said.
Nakikiramay tayo dun sa gagong-gago na dun sa OFW na namatayan ng anak niya ngayon. Masakit, no? They are investigating it. They are interviewing the driver. The driver will be subjected to mandatory drug testing.
We'll head back to Romania as they head back to the polls in a high-stakes presidential election rerun following last November's vote, which was annulled by the Constitutional Court. This was due to allegations of Russian interference. The decision sparked widespread protests and accusations of a political coup by far-right supporters after their candidate, Calin Georgescu, was barred from running again. George Simeon, leader of the nationalist AUR party, cast his vote. Simeon has vowed to put Romania first, reject EU bureaucracy and scale back support for Ukraine. Simeon's rise reflects growing nationalist sentiment and deep frustration with Romania's political establishment amid inflation and immigration. Cirin Antonescu, the main centrist challenger backed by Romania's pro-European coalition, condemned the rerun as a social trauma. He warned that a far-right presidency could isolate Romania from its Western allies. With tensions high and international observers, including the United States, the votes could shape Romania's leadership. Moving on now, voters have handed Singapore's long-time ruling party a decisive election victory, granting Prime Minister Lawrence Wong a clear mandate to steer the trade-dependent nation through economic challenges, including the looming threat of US tariffs. Wong's People Action Party secured all but 10 seats in the 97-seat legislature, claiming 65.57 of the more than 2.4 million votes cast in Saturday's polls. Wong said Singaporeans gave the PAP a strong mandate to govern shortly after the official results were announced. He emphasised that the outcome would better position Singapore to navigate global uncertainties and was a clear signal of trust, stability and confidence in the government. Let's hear what he said.
Election takes place at a critical time for Singapore. It is a changed world, not just an economic slowdown, but fundamental shifts in the international order. And we've just had a leadership transition. This is my first election as Prime Minister and Secretary General of the PAP. My team and I gave it our all in this campaign, and I am deeply humbled and grateful for the results.
Well, that is all that we have time for, but we will continue to bring you more of the latest breaking news from across the world.